They waited for help, and the Deathworlders of Earth stood before them. The planet Zephyria was not a forgiving place. Its skies were a deep, bruised purple, swirling with storms that came without warning. Its ground was cracked and jagged, stretching like a broken puzzle across endless plains. For the small human colony that had settled there 10 years ago, every day was a fight, not just against the alien environment, but against the creatures that called it home. Inside the colony's central dome, Lieutenant Mara Kellen stared at the viewport, her face pale in the glow of the red emergency lights. The storm outside had knocked out several of the dome's external shields, and the creatures were pressing closer. From a distance, she could see their silhouettes moving in unnatural patterns, tall, insect-like forms with armored shells that shimmered like metal in the storm light. They had come in waves, clever and relentless, and every time the settlers thought they had survived one night, more would appear. "Status report," Mara's voice cut through the comlink, sharp and tense. "Shields are holding at 30%, ma'am," came the reply from the communications officer, a young man named Riel. His hands shook slightly as he typed commands into the terminal. "Life support is stable, but food and water supplies are down to emergency rations." He paused, swallowing hard. "We can't hold much longer if the attacks keep coming." Mara's jaw tightened. She had seen this kind of fear before, but not in her own team, not when she was supposed to be the one keeping them safe. She turned to the rest of the command crew, their faces drawn and tired. Everyone knew what had to happen. "We send the signal," Mara said, voice low but firm. "They have to know we need help, no more waiting." The communication room hummed with urgency. Riel's fingers flew over the keyboard, sending the colony's distress signal across the sector. It was a standard protocol, a loud, clear message broadcasting the colony's coordinates, the nature of the attacks, and a plea for immediate aid. But sending the signal did not bring immediate comfort. Out there, beyond the atmosphere, in the darkness of space, the signal had to reach someone, somewhere willing to respond. And the colonists had no guarantee that anyone would come. Outside, the alien creatures pressed closer. Their movements were coordinated, almost intelligent. They seemed to study the humans' defenses, probing for weaknesses. Mara could feel the tension building in the air, thick and heavy like a storm about to break. She knew that if the attackers breached the dome, survival would be nearly impossible. "Ma'am," Riel said softly, his voice trembling. "I've never seen them act like this. It's like they understand the walls, the shields, like they know exactly where to strike." Mara didn't answer immediately. She didn't need to. She had seen the same thing. The aliens were not just hunting, they were testing. And for a human colony so far from Earth, so isolated, the stakes could not be higher. "Prepare the defensive drones," Mara ordered, her voice calm but commanding. "Even if help doesn't come in time, we fight, we survive. That is our choice." The colony's small drones hummed to life, mechanical wings cutting through the storm-tossed air. They flew low over the jagged terrain, scanning for movement. When the first of the creatures attacked the perimeter, the drones responded with precision. Bolts of concentrated energy struck the creatures, and some fell, but others advanced, seemingly unafraid of the colony's defenses. Inside the dome, panic began to rise. Families huddled in the emergency shelters, listening to the low, resonant screeches of the alien attackers outside. Children clutched small stuffed toys as their parents whispered promises they did not entirely believe themselves. Mara moved among the settlers, checking the integrity of the barricades, reassuring anyone she could. She stopped by a young boy named Lion, barely 10, who had been peeking out from behind a protective wall. His eyes were wide with fear, and his small hands trembled. "It's going to be okay," Mara said softly, kneeling beside him. "We're not alone, help is coming." Lion's lips quivered. "Do you really think they'll come?" he asked. Mara hesitated. She had no certainty, but she had to keep him and the rest of the colony hopeful. "Yes," she said firmly. "They will come. We just have to hold on a little longer." She moved back to the command center as the storm outside intensified. Rain pelted the dome, lightning arced across the sky, and the creatures' shrieks echoed in the distance. Every second felt like a lifetime. Mara watched the monitors, tracking each alien movement, calculating every defensive response. Hours passed, and the colony held. The drones managed to fend off the creatures' advances, but only barely. Every breach of the perimeter sent a wave of terror through the settlers. Food and water were running low, morale was fraying, and the storm showed no sign of easing. Late in the evening, Mara received a message from a nearby exploration team. They had been scouting a region outside the colony's immediate perimeter when they encountered a pack of alien predators. Only one member had survived. The report was grim, filled with details of creatures that could adapt to almost any human defense. Mara felt the weight of command pressing down on her shoulders. She knew the colony's survival depended not just on luck or strength, it depended on the arrival of outside help. Yet every hour that passed without a response gnawed at her confidence. As the night deepened, she walked along the dome's observation deck. Below, the landscape seemed alien even to her trained eyes. Sharp cliffs jutted out like teeth, and rivers of glowing liquid ran through the valleys. Strange, luminous plants bent and twisted in the storm winds, some reacting to the humans' presence as if aware. It was a beautiful world in its own terrifying way, but also a deadly one. Mara thought about Earth, about the stories she had heard of home, the blue skies, green forests, oceans full of life. She missed it in ways she hadn't thought possible until now. Zephyria had no mercy, and yet here they were, humans stubbornly surviving. Her thoughts were interrupted by the blaring alarm of the communications console. Riel's voice came over the comm, tight with tension. "Ma'am, we're picking up a signal. It's faint, but it's definitely human." Mara's heart skipped a beat. She rushed to the console, scanning the incoming transmission. The signal was heavily encrypted, as expected, and partially distorted by interference. But one thing was clear: someone had responded. Who is it?" Mara asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I can't tell yet, ma'am," Riel replied. "It's coming from outside the Coalition's normal patrol routes. I don't recognize the signature." Mara's mind raced. Could it be another human colony nearby, or some specialized rescue unit sent by the Coalition? She didn't know, but the fact that help was finally arriving lifted a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying. "Good," she said firmly. "Prepare a response. Tell them we are holding but need immediate extraction assistance, and keep scanning for more details." As the storm raged on, Mara allowed herself a small measure of hope. The colony might survive. They might make it through the night. For now, they waited, watching the skies, praying the mysterious responders would arrive before the creatures broke through their walls. The settlers, exhausted and frightened, clung to that hope like a lifeline. And Mara, standing on the observation deck, felt a renewed determination settle in her chest. Whoever was coming, they would see what humans were capable of, even on a death world like Zephyria. And if the creatures thought they could destroy humanity so easily, they were about to learn a very different lesson. The storm on Zephyria had not eased, but the human colony's attention shifted from the relentless creatures outside to the faint signals appearing on there. Monitors. Mara Kellen stood in the command center, her eyes scanning the data, her mind racing. Whoever had responded to their distress was moving fast enough that hope, fragile as it was, began to take shape in the hearts of the settlers. "They're approaching," Riel said, pointing to the display. "Distance 50,000 kilometers, estimated time of arrival 2 hours. Mara nodded. 2 hours could change everything or nothing. She had learned to be cautious. Zephyria was merciless, and optimism could lead to careless mistakes. Still, the thought of human reinforcements brought an unfamiliar surge of relief. Outside the dome, the wind howled, tearing at the shields and rattling the walls. The creatures had paused, perhaps sensing something different in the approaching ships, or perhaps waiting for the humans to falter. Either way, the colony could not waste time. Mara called the settlers together. "Listen carefully," she said, her voice steady and commanding. "Help is coming. We do not know who they are yet, but they are human. They will land soon. Until then, hold your positions. Trust your training, trust the walls, and trust each other." A murmur of cautious hope spread through the room. For the first time in days, the fear in their eyes was tempered by anticipation. Children still clung to their parents, but the tension in the air felt less suffocating. As the hours passed, the signal grew stronger. The monitors finally displayed the shapes of the approaching ships. They were unlike anything the colony had expected. The hulls were rugged, reinforced with extra layers of armor. They moved with a precision and confidence that spoke of experience in harsh conditions. There were no sleek lines or shiny finishes. These ships were built to survive, to endure, to win. "They look old," whispered one of the settlers. "Or different." Mara did not answer immediately. She had seen ships before, but these were unfamiliar. Something about them radiated a presence that demanded respect. These were not ordinary coalition vessels. They were something else entirely. As the ships entered Zephiria's atmosphere, the colony's sensors picked up movement across the terrain. Small craft detached from the main ships, dropping quickly into the valleys and plains near the colony. They did not land conventionally. Instead, they skidded and rolled over the jagged terrain, avoiding obstacles with uncanny agility. Mara's heart pounded. Everyone stay inside the dome. Do not engage unless ordered. The settlers obeyed, but their curiosity was impossible to suppress. From the observation windows, they watched the newcomers descend. The humans who emerged were unlike any the colonists had seen before. They were taller, broader, and moved with a confidence that seemed almost unnatural in a world like Zephyria. Their armor was minimal but highly reinforced, designed to allow freedom of movement. Every step they took seemed calculated, as if the ground itself respected them or feared them. "They're human," Lion whispered, his eyes wide with awe, "but like nothing I've seen." Mara did not respond. She had the same thought herself. She had heard stories of Earth, the so-called Deathworld, but she had never imagined seeing humans who had adapted so completely to extreme environments. These were not soldiers trained for comfort. These were humans trained for survival in the most hostile worlds imaginable. The newcomers advanced toward the perimeter of the colony, scanning the surroundings with mechanical precision. Mara observed them carefully, noting their movements. They did not rush. They did not panic. They assessed, calculated, and acted. Then the creatures outside noticed them. For the first time, the alien attackers hesitated. They had grown accustomed to humans who ran, hid, and made mistakes. But these newcomers were different. The creatures advanced cautiously, testing the humans' reactions. And the humans responded. Without a sound, they unleashed a series of precise attacks. Small, handheld devices fired pulses of energy that disrupted the creatures' nervous systems. Others used nets of luminous energy that trapped the attackers, immobilizing them without killing. Every move was efficient, controlled, and devastatingly effective. Mara and the settlers watched in disbelief. They had fought and barely survived for days, but these newcomers, these Earth Deathworlders, handled the creatures as if they were toys. Within moments, the perimeter was cleared, and the colony could breathe a tentative sigh of relief. One of the newcomers, a tall woman with short-cropped hair and piercing green eyes, approached the dome's entrance. Her voice was calm but authoritative. "Colony survivors," she called out, "we are here to assist. Stand down and stay inside." Mara stepped forward, her chest swelling with relief and curiosity. "We are survivors," she replied. Who are you?" The woman smiled faintly. "We are from Earth," she said simply. "The Deathworlders, we survive where others fail, and now we are here to ensure you do too." The settlers exchanged stunned glances. Earth had long been considered uninhabitable by anyone outside its orbit. The stories of humans thriving on violent, unforgiving worlds had become legends. And now those legends were standing before them, real and alive. Mara swallowed hard. "Earth Deathworlders?" "Yes," the woman said. "We have trained for conditions far worse than Zephyria. Our goal is simple: secure this colony and teach you to survive. If the creatures think you are easy prey, they are wrong." With that, the Deathworlders moved among the settlers, assessing defenses, noting weak points, and establishing control without chaos. They communicated with clear gestures and simple commands, ensuring everyone knew where to go and what to do. Mara followed them cautiously. She was both impressed and cautious. She had led this colony for years, but these humans, these Earth Deathworlders, operated on an entirely different level. Outside, the creatures regrouped, sensing the intrusion of a superior force, but the Deathworlders were ready. They moved in formations that seemed almost natural, anticipating attacks before they happened. Mara watched as they dismantled traps and forced the alien predators into controlled zones, neutralizing them with minimal risk. It was a display of skill and courage that left the settlers speechless. The creatures, for all their intelligence, could not match humans who had thrived on worlds designed to kill them. Mara realized something profound. Survival was not just about weapons or technology. It was about adaptability, courage, and understanding the environment better than any predator. Hours passed, and the colony slowly regained a sense of control. The storm continued, but it no longer seemed like an unstoppable force. The Deathworlders moved calmly, efficiently, and with a quiet confidence that inspired the settlers. Myra finally approached the tall woman again. How did you survive on Earth? I've heard it's—" She hesitated. Unforgiving. The woman's eyes softened slightly. Earth is harsh, yes, but humans are stronger than most believe. We adapted, we learned, we endured. That strength, it is not just physical, it is mental, emotional. We survive because we refuse to give up. That is what makes humans dangerous, even on worlds that try to kill them. Myra felt a surge of respect and a glimmer of hope. Perhaps the colony could survive this after all. That night, for the first time in days, the colony slept without fear of an immediate breach. The Deathworlders maintained perimeter patrols, their presence a constant reassurance. Myra walked among the settlers, seeing the wonder in their eyes. Children peeked through windows at the newcomers, adults whispered stories they would recount for years, and Myra herself allowed herself a rare smile. She realized that this arrival was not just about survival, it was about something greater. Humanity, even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, had the power to endure, to fight, and to inspire. The Earth Deathworlders embodied that spirit, and now they were teaching it to the colony. Outside, the alien creatures regrouped, their numbers undiminished but their confidence shaken. They had faced humans before, yes, but never like this. The Deathworlders were not afraid. They had faced far worse, on worlds designed to destroy every living thing, and yet here they were, standing firm against Zephyria's fiercest predators. Mara knew the battle was not over. Zephyria would continue to challenge them, storm after storm, creature after creature. But with the Deathworlders here, she felt the first real hope she had allowed herself in weeks. Survival was no longer a distant dream. It was possible, and more than that, it was likely. As dawn approached, the first rays of Zephyria's dim sun pierced the storm clouds, illuminating the rugged terrain and the determined faces of humanity's finest. Mara looked at the Deathworlders, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it together. And in that moment, she understood something essential. The humans of Earth were not just survivors. They were a force that even the deadliest worlds could not break. For the first time in a long while, the settlers believed. And sometimes, Mara thought, that belief could be as powerful as any weapon. The storm over Zephyria had lessened, but the world was far from safe. Jagged cliffs and glowing rivers made every step dangerous, and the alien creatures continued to roam the planet, testing the limits of human defenses. But inside the colony, a new energy had taken root. Hope, and it came in the form of the Deathworlders from Earth. Lieutenant Mara Kellen followed the team outside the dome. Her boots crunched over the jagged terrain as she observed the newcomers. Every move they made was precise, almost effortless, and yet powerful. They climbed rocky slopes that would have left any normal human exhausted, navigated rivers of glowing liquid without hesitation, and assessed the alien landscape with keen eyes that seemed to see far more than the colony's instruments could measure. The settlers watched from behind the safety of the dome. For them, this was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. They had survived weeks of constant threat, barely keeping the creatures at bay. Yet here were humans who moved as if Zephyria were a training ground rather than a deathworld. The lead Deathworlder, the woman Mara had met the day before, called out a series of sharp commands. Her team responded instantly, splitting into groups that fanned out across the perimeter. Each member carried compact but lethal-looking tools, some to immobilize, some to study, and some to defend against the creatures' attacks. "Observe," the lead said, her voice calm but carrying authority. "Everything here can be used against the enemy. Nothing is wasted. Adaptation is our strongest weapon." The creatures appeared almost immediately, emerging from the dark forest-like areas that bordered the colony. Tall and armored, they moved with unnerving intelligence, swarming toward the humans. But the Deathworlders were ready. One of them, a man with broad shoulders and weathered skin, activated a small device that emitted a pulse of light and sound. The creatures froze, their limbs twitching in confusion. Then another device released a sticky, transparent net that enveloped several of the attackers, holding them in place without causing harm. Mara's breath caught. She had never seen humans fight in this way. There were no frantic maneuvers or desperate shots fired blindly. Every move was calculated, every action purposeful. And it worked. The creatures, so often victorious against the colony's defenses, were now struggling against humans who seemed immune to fear. One of the settlers whispered to another, How can they do this? They've survived worse, Mara said softly, watching the team work. That's the answer. They've been trained to endure what would kill anyone else. The Deathworlders advanced further, clearing zones of alien threats with efficiency that bordered on artistry. Mara followed at a cautious distance, helping where she could, but mostly observing. She knew the lesson here was more than just fighting. It was about understanding the environment and using it, not merely surviving in spite of it. The creatures regrouped, forming a tight circle around one of the Deathworlders. The colonists held their breath, expecting a confrontation. But the human simply stood still, studied the creatures, and then moved with sudden speed. Using a small handheld device, he created a controlled shockwave that stunned the attackers, forcing them to retreat without direct harm. Mara realized then what made these humans different. They did not kill unless necessary. They adapted, studied, and outsmarted. Violence was a tool, not a solution. Every action served the purpose of survival and protection. Hours passed as the Deathworlders worked tirelessly. They mapped the terrain, identified patterns in the creatures' behavior, and set traps that could safely neutralize the threats. Mara and her team assisted when possible, learning from every action, every tactic. By midday, the perimeter of the colony was far more secure than it had been in weeks. The alien creatures, once emboldened and aggressive, now approached cautiously, testing the humans' defenses rather than attacking outright. Mara walked among the settlers, noting the change in their demeanor. Fear had not disappeared, but it was tempered by respect and hope. One of the settlers, a man named Varro, approached Mara. "Lieutenant, do you think we can really survive now?" he asked, his voice tentative. Mara looked at the Deathworlders in the distance, moving like shadows over the rough terrain, handling threats with skill and precision. "Yes," she said quietly, "we can survive. We just have to learn from them and keep our focus. These humans, they're showing us what it means to endure." That afternoon, the lead Deathworlder called the colonists together. Mara watched as the settlers gathered in a central clearing, the alien landscape stretching ominously around them. The woman's presence was commanding, yet not threatening. She spoke slowly, ensuring everyone could understand. "You have survived until now," she said. "But survival is not enough. You must adapt. You must learn to move, to think, to anticipate. Zephyria is unforgiving, but humans, we endure. You can endure. Today you will learn how." The first lesson was simple but profound: observation. The Deathworlders led the settlers through a field where the creatures had recently been active. They showed how to track footprints, how to identify signs of hunting or nesting, and how to recognize traps set by the aliens themselves. Every detail mattered, and every movement could mean the difference between life and death. Mara noted how quickly some settlers absorbed the lessons. Others struggled, their fear making them hesitant. But the Deathworlders were patient, encouraging, and firm. They emphasized understanding over brute force, strategy over panic. Slowly, the colonists began to see patterns where before there had been only chaos. Next came mobility. The Deathworlders demonstrated techniques for moving quickly over jagged terrain, crossing rivers of glowing liquid, and climbing steep cliffs without attracting attention. Mara tried to follow, feeling the sting of cold wind and the rough edges of rock under her boots. It was exhausting, but also exhilarating. The settlers began to understand that Zephyria was dangerous, yes, but not unconquerable. As the day wore on, the Deathworlders demonstrated controlled combat techniques. They did not aim to kill the creatures unless necessary, but to redirect and neutralize them. Pulses of energy, nets, traps, and shockwaves were all used with precision. Mara watched, fascinated, as a team member trapped a small group of attackers and released them far from the colony, ensuring their survival while protecting the humans. "You see," the lead Deathworlder explained, "violence without strategy is weakness. Adaptation, patience, and observation, these are what make humans strong. Not just strength, not just courage, understanding. That is the key to surviving Zephyria." By evening, the settlers had participated in their first field exercise. They moved cautiously, guided by the Deathworlders' instructions, tracking simulated creatures and setting defensive measures. Mara noticed a change in their posture and their eyes. Fear had not vanished, but it had transformed into focus. Hope had turned into determination. As night fell, the colony gathered in the dome. Fires were lit, meals were prepared from emergency rations, and for the first time in weeks, a sense of community returned. Mara sat with her officers, discussing what had been learned. "The Deathworlders are incredible," said Riel, his hands still trembling slightly from the day's events. "But they're teaching us to think differently, not just fight differently. That's powerful." Mara nodded. "Exactly. We're learning how to survive, not just how to react. That's the real lesson, and if we can master it, we can hold Zephyria." Outside, the alien creatures prowled, but their confidence had waned. They no longer charged blindly at the colony. They observed, hesitated, and sometimes retreated. Even they seemed to recognize that something had changed, something fundamental about the humans defending this settlement. That night, Mara could not sleep. She walked along the observation deck, staring at the dark plains beyond the dome. She thought about Earth, about the Deathworlders, and about the lessons of the day. Humans had survived on planets far more deadly than Zephyria, and those skills were now being shared with her colony. She felt a quiet pride. For weeks, she had feared that Zephyria would claim the colony. Now there was a real chance not just to survive, but to thrive. And it was all because of the humans who had endured the worst, the Deathworlders from Earth. Mara looked toward the horizon. The glowing rivers reflected the stars above, and in their shimmer she saw a future where humans would not just exist, but endure, no matter how hostile the world. Tomorrow, the Deathworlders promised more lessons: tactics, strategy, and how to reclaim territory from the alien creatures. For the first time, Mara felt that the battle for Zephyria was not a desperate struggle. It was a challenge she and her colony could meet, shoulder to shoulder with humans who had mastered survival itself. And in that moment, she understood a truth she had long suspected but never fully appreciated. Humanity was not defined by its comfort, its technology, or its numbers. Humanity was defined by its will to endure, its ability to adapt, and its refusal to surrender, even when facing worlds designed to destroy it. Zephyria had tested them, but the Deathworlders had shown that humans could rise to any challenge. And Mara knew with absolute certainty that if these humans could survive Earth, they could survive Zephyria, and so could she. The first light of Zephyria's weak sun cut through the lingering storm clouds, casting long shadows over the jagged landscape. The colony, once battered and barely holding together, now stood with a renewed sense of purpose. The presence of the Deathworlders had changed everything. The settlers were no longer simply defending, they were preparing to reclaim their home. Lieutenant Mara Kellen stood at the edge of the main dome, watching the Earth Deathworlders organize into teams. Each human moved with precision and calm, assessing the terrain, checking supplies, and preparing for the first offensive sweep. For Mara, this was unlike any other day she had experienced in her years on Zephyria. She could feel hope spreading among the colonists, a cautious but real energy that had been absent for weeks. "You ready for this?" she asked Riel, who stood beside her, scanning the horizon with nervous excitement. Riel nodded slowly. "We've survived until now by hiding, but today we take back what's ours," Mara exhaled. "Then let's follow the Deathworlders, they'll show us how." The team set out beyond the colony's perimeter, moving over the jagged cliffs and glowing rivers that had so long defined Zephyria as a hostile world. Mara noted how the Deathworlders handled the terrain. Every step was calculated. Every obstacle was used as a tool. Where the settlers had once seen danger, the Deathworlders saw opportunity. "Keep your eyes open," the lead Deathworlder instructed. "The creatures will test you, they will probe, but now we are not running, we are reclaiming, we are human." Mara felt a shiver of awe. Every colonist knew the creatures, attacks by instinct. They had been fighting for survival for months. Yet these humans moved with confidence that made fear seem irrelevant. Their first encounter came sooner than expected. A group of alien predators emerged from a nearby ravine, their armored bodies glinting in the dim sunlight. The settlers instinctively froze, but the Deathworlders did not flinch. "Form up," the lead ordered. The humans spread into a defensive line, covering each other's blind spots. Energy pulses discharged from handheld devices, forcing the creatures to halt, retreating just enough to reveal their weaknesses. Mara led a group of settlers forward under the Deathworlders' guidance. They moved carefully, using the terrain as cover, learning to read the environment in ways they had never considered. When the creatures attacked again, the settlers reacted instinctively, redirecting them into traps set moments earlier. The sight was almost unbelievable. Humans and settlers working together outsmarted creatures that had terrorized the colony for weeks. The alien predators had adapted to the settlers' previous defenses, but they were unprepared for these new strategies. Every strike was precise. Every maneuver was calculated. Hours passed as the teams cleared a path back toward the colony. Each reclaimed section of terrain was a victory, small but significant. The settlers began to understand that Zephyria's hostility was not absolute. It could be managed, controlled, and even turned against itself. During a break, Mara watched a young settler, a boy no older than Lion, mimic the movements of one of the Deathworlders. He climbed a sharp cliff with surprising agility, using handholds and footholds the Deathworlders had taught him to navigate. The boy's face glowed with pride. For the first time, he felt capable on this alien world. "You see," the lead Deathworlder said, noticing Mara's gaze. "Adaptation is the greatest weapon. Teach them, guide them, but let them learn for themselves. Confidence is survival." Mara nodded. She realized that this was not just about reclaiming land, it was about reclaiming courage. The settlers had survived by fear. Now they were surviving by skill. As the teams advanced further, the creatures began to behave differently. They no longer charged recklessly. Instead, they tested, probed, and watched. Mara noticed the difference immediately. Even the alien predators seemed to recognize the change in the humans' approach. Where they had once assumed weakness, they now met strategy. Where they had once predicted panic, they now found precision. A sudden shriek echoed from the valley below. A group of settlers had encountered a larger, more dangerous predator, a creature almost twice the size of the others, with armored plates and razor-sharp limbs. Mara felt her chest tighten, but she did not hesitate. "Remember your training," she called to her group. "We are human, we endure, we adapt." The Deathworlders moved swiftly. One member activated a device that released a series of low-frequency pulses, confusing the massive predator. Others created barriers and guided it toward a narrow canyon where it could be trapped without harm. Mara followed their instructions to the letter, positioning settlers to cover weak points. It worked. The predator struggled but could not break free, contained by human strategy rather than brute force. The settlers stared in amazement, their confidence growing with each successful maneuver. By evening, the first major offensive sweep was complete. The colony had reclaimed significant territory, including parts of the outer dome previously lost to alien incursions. The settlers gathered near the central hub, exhausted but exhilarated. Mara addressed them, her voice carrying across the cleared field. "Look at what you have accomplished," she said. "You faced fear, you faced creatures that seemed unstoppable, and you won. Today you learned that Zephyria is dangerous, yes, but it is not undefeatable, and neither are we." The settlers cheered, a sound that had not echoed in the colony for weeks. Even children ran through the cleared areas, pointing at what they had helped secure. For the first time, Zephyria seemed a place they could master, not just endure. That night, around fires in the dome, the Deathworlders shared more than survival techniques. They shared stories. They spoke of Earth, a planet far harsher than Zephyria, and of humans who had survived against impossible odds. Mara listened, captivated, as settlers absorbed the lessons embedded in each tale: courage, ingenuity, teamwork, and the will to endure. Varro, still exhausted from the day's efforts, whispered to Mara, "I never thought we could hold our own. But now," his voice trailed off, filled with wonder. Mara smiled. "You can, you just needed to see it done and to know it's possible." That's what the Deathworlders have shown us. Outside, the creatures retreated to the forests and cliffs, their confidence shaken. They still prowled, still hunted, but they approached more cautiously. Even they seemed to sense that the humans were no longer helpless prey. They were strategic, resourceful, and united. Over the next few days, the Deathworlders continued their training and tactical operations. The settlers learned to track the creatures, to set traps, to move silently across the dangerous terrain. They learned to anticipate attacks, to protect each other, and to reclaim territory once considered lost. Mara noticed a transformation in the colonists. Fear had not vanished, but it had evolved into focus. Confidence replaced panic. Hope replaced despair. And every step they took under the guidance of the Deathworlders brought them closer to becoming true survivors of Zephyria. During one operation, Mara led a small team to reclaim an outpost previously overrun by creatures. The terrain was treacherous, with narrow ridges and sharp cliffs. Mara followed the Deathworlders' instructions carefully, guiding settlers through each obstacle. They moved like a single unit, communicating silently, reacting instinctively to threats. At the outpost, they encountered a massive nest of alien predators. The creatures surged forward, but the Deathworlders directed the settlers flawlessly, using terrain, energy pulses, and non-lethal traps to neutralize the threat. By the end, the outpost was secure, and the settlers had gained invaluable experience in strategic coordination. Back at the colony, Mara addressed her team. "We are no longer just defending, we are reclaiming. Zephyria may be a death world, but today we showed it that humans can endure, adapt, and overcome. This is just the beginning." The settlers cheered again, their voices echoing across the alien plains. For the first time, they did not feel like victims of the world around them. They felt like masters of their fate. The Deathworlders watched with quiet satisfaction. Their mission was not only to protect but to empower, and they had succeeded. The colonists were no longer helpless. They were capable, confident, and ready to face whatever Zephyria would throw at them next. Mara looked over the cleared terrain, the tents, the walls, and the recovered outposts. She realized something profound. Survival was no longer a passive act. It was active, deliberate, and strategic. And humanity, through courage, intelligence, and adaptability, could thrive even on a planet designed to destroy it. As night fell, the stars glittered above the jagged Zephyrian landscape. Mara stood on the observation deck once more, watching the Deathworlders patrol the perimeter with practiced ease. She felt a deep sense of gratitude and determination. The battle was not over, but for the first time, she truly believed victory was possible. Zephyria had tested them. It had forced them to confront fear, danger, and the limits of endurance. But under the guidance of the Earth Deathworlders, the colony had begun to turn the tide. And Mara knew that humanity's strength, the will to endure, adapt, and overcome, was a force even the deadliest world could not break. Tomorrow, she thought, they would go further. They would reclaim more land, fortify defenses, and strengthen the colony. And each day, the settlers would grow stronger, braver, and more capable of standing against Zephyria's dangers, because they were human, and humans endured.